Hey guys, Climax Combo here again. I'm Chekkerz and I'm going to be profiling my new Danmachi deck. The deck is red, blue, yellow, and it uses these two combos, the Pants and the Gate combo with the Bell and the Hestia. I've playtested a lot of different builds, and this setup that I have right now I think is super fun. I think there's a lot of strong cards from the set in this build, and I think the build is fairly strong, so that's why I wanted to profile this deck first. And I'm going to be going over the lineup, how I generally play the deck level by level, and some things to keep in mind, as well as alternatives for this deck, specifically Pants and Gate. Once you start to add different combos, the deck kind of becomes really different. So I'm going to try to keep the alternative list short and very specific to these colors. So let's get into it. By the way, this is the first player card, Hestia. The second player is Eyes. She'll be joining us today because this mat is a little too cool. But for level 0, we'll be starting with this Hestia, level 0, 1500 power. Her first effect can happen up to once per turn. When you play an event, you can draw a card and discard a card. And her other effect, you can pay 1, rest her, to brainstorm, reveal the top 4 cards of your library, and for each climax you hit, you can search for a character. So 3 of these. This card is fairly important in this deck. This deck runs 8 events, and this helps filter out your hand a lot. It's a standard brainstorm, so it's always great to have around. Brainstorm whenever you need to is very important. So 3 of those. 3 of these, 0/0 Hestia, 1500 power. 2 on play effects. The first one, you can reveal the top 3 cards of your library and choose an event from among those 3, add it to your hand. If you do so, discard a card. And her other effect, choose one of your opponent's characters. That character cannot move slots until the end of your opponent's next turn. Another very important card for this deck, a lot of events, like I said. This can actually help you grab those events, which helps for consistency. And the second effect is very good against runners. It helps make sure your opponent doesn't go out of control early on. And it also can help with standby decks. If your opponent plays standby during their turn and puts them in the back row, then you can just play this card and they're not able to move them forward. Those strong level 2s and level 1s that come out early to kind of just own you and get a lot of advantage kind of really helps in that matchup. So 3 of those. 4 of this Eyes from the TD, 0/0, 2k power. If you have 1 or less other characters, she gets plus 1500 power, and her other effect, at the start of your opponent's attack phase, you can move her to an empty slot on your stage in front of an opponent's character. So 3500 essentially, and runs in front of characters. This card is very strong. 3500 power is a great number to hit, and the condition is fairly easy. Only playing 2 cards is not that much of a downside. And especially since it can run in front of characters, you will be mitigating how much direct attacks you're taking early on. It's just a really great card. And drawing into this in the beginning of the game is very important. So that's why I run 4. One of these Tionas. On play, you can choose a card in your level up zone and a card from your waiting room and swap them. And her other effect, pay 1, discard a card, or discard a climax, salvage a climax. These cards are always nice to help with consistency for the deck. Getting your combos off are very important. And you can't really grab climaxes unless you have this card, and even then it's only swapping, so you need to draw into your climaxes and then swap them if you need to. It's very important late game especially to get your level 3 combos off. And the other effect is nice to have, just in case you get screwed. One of the cards later in the deck, spoilers, requires herself in the level up zone. So this can help with those games where you kind of get screwed. So one of these, always nice to have. two of these PRs, the lady, she is 2k base. She gets +1 soul if she's in the front center row, and her on play effect, pay 1, discard a card, and salvage a character, and give something +1k. I am loving this card. This is a new edition. I finally got my PRs in, but this card is super awesome. There are a lot of things about it. The +1 soul on this level 0 for a very easy condition just helps to add damage early on, which is very nice and very useful in this deck. The other effect, the salvaging from waiting room, is very important. There's not too many ways in this deck to salvage. A lot of it is searching. So it's nice to have versatility where you grab your cards from to make the deck more consistent. And the 1k is also very useful. So everything besides this eyes is fairly weak. 1500 is like probably, or 2k, I guess. So giving 1k to her or one of these cards, it's very useful. This card has a lot to offer in this deck, so I like running it. Two of these Aina 0/0, 500 power. Her first effect, pay 1, discard a card to search for a character. And her other effect is she is a level 0 suicider. If the opponent that reversed her is level 0, you can send that character to the bottom of your opponent's deck. So very useful in killing your opponent's cards, as well as utility, searching out, being able to pay 1, draw ditch is super important. There's not too many ways to pay. I guess there are, like this card, the Brainstorm, the Climaxer, and then the last card. But having more available and different options, I am finding I really enjoy. And lastly, for level 0, 3 of these 0/0 Bell, 500 power. First effect, during at the start of your opponent's attack phase, you can pay 1 to clock yourself, send this card to your hand or back to your hand, choose one of your other cards, and also bring that back to your hand. And the other effect is, if you're level 2, you can pay 1, send him to the waiting room to bring the 2/1 double R Bell to the stage. But I don't run that card in this deck, so he's really only here for the first effect, which is a very good effect. It's essentially +2 because you're getting 2 cards back to your hand. You can kind of reuse your on-play effect. This is the only free one, but you might need these in desperate times. But honestly, it's mostly here for the color count, and it's like the most useful red level 0 in the set, to be honest. So he's nice to have, but I find myself not using it too much. Getting hand isn't super hard with this deck, but it can still be useful early on. And it is risky, though. You're opening up your stage early to get 2 direct attacks in is kind of, you could take a lot of damage, but it's not that bad. It's a good card. It's a very good card. So that's my level 0 lineup, 18 level 0s. It's kind of a lot, but I'm finding that this wide range of cards helps make the deck a lot more consistent. And honestly, the targets later on in the deck for level 1 and level 3 and 2, you just want to keep recycling them. They're very strong, and having level 0s that kind of guarantee the consistency of the rest of the deck is very important, in my opinion. So there we go. Moving on to level 1, this is where the fun begins. I'm going to show you all the cards first, the lineup, because they all kind of work with each other. So 4 of those 1/0 bells, 4 of this Firebolt event, and 4 of this Hestia's Knife event. Starting with the bell, he's 4,500 base. When he attacks, he gets plus 1,500 power for each Firebolt in your waiting room. He also has a Climax combo with the gate or door, whatever you want to call it. When you play this Climax, you can either search your deck or salvage from your waiting room a Hestia's Knife event. The Firebolt event, when you play it, you can salvage a character whose level is equal to how many bells, 1/0 bells, you have in the waiting room. So if you have 3 bells in the waiting room, you can get a level 3 or lower. And the Hestia's Knife event, You can't play this card unless you have a Bell or a Hestia. You can't use this as a backup unless you have a Bell on stage, specifically Bell. And it ignores the color ruling, so you don't need blue to play it. And lastly, when you use this card, you reveal the top 4 cards of your library and add a character to your hand. So this whole interaction is why I like this deck. It's a lot of fun, and you're kind of just looping this over and over until it's like kind of later in the game. But there's a lot of strong points. First of all, this Bell can hit pretty crazy numbers. With just one event, he's 6k, level 1 costless, which is not bad. But I think it's fairly consistent to get more of these events in the waiting room, considering you have a lot of milling in this deck. So once you start to hit those higher numbers, it can get pretty awesome. 6k, 7,500, 9k, 10.5 is the highest it can be with all 4 in the waiting room, which is awesome. And 11.5 with the Climax combo. It's a very strong number. For a costless card, it's like, it can be very rewarding. You can get over a lot of strong cards. This Bell is very essential to kind of getting a rhythm going and getting some advantage in this game. The Firebolt's cool. It's you can miss its usefulness sometimes because it does rely on that Bell, and you're not able to always get exactly what you want. But early on, you definitely will be able to grab like a level 0 to help guarantee you can search things out. You just need one Bell to get himself out and into your hand, and then you can start using his combo. I still think it's fairly consistent. And lastly, the Hestia's Knife is just a phenomenal card. The fact that you can use it as a backup is super awesome early. You mill 4. Keep in mind, you do have the Hestia Brainstormer at level 0 that lets you draw 1 ditch. So even on your opponent's turn, you're essentially going through 5 of your cards in your deck, and that can be pretty crucial even as early as level 1, because if you know you don't have a Climax and you're going to take a lot of damage, you can mill through 5 and start to hope to cancel. It helps you control your refresh a lot, combined with those level 0s as well, because the Hestia does let you discard a card. You can ditch Climaxes at the right before your refresh. The other Hestia level 0 that can grab events also guarantees, like, it helps with consistency, because you can start milling, you can start getting these fireballs out to power up your bells. You can even mill the bells out to salvage more things. This whole combo is really awesome and really fun, and I think it's not super inconsistent. It's you only need these 8 events to really get what you want, and I'll go into alternatives a bit later to see if you want to make it more consistent, but I think this level 1, these are all the level 1s you need for this deck, to be honest. The only downside is your turns kind of take forever, at least for me. I spend a long time thinking about milling and which cards I need to grab and what I'm looking for. You know, there's a lot of press your luck to it, but it's honestly not that bad. And I think this whole thing is just super awesome. All right, so on to level 2. We have one of these 2/1 Hestias, 6,500 power. On play, you can choose one of your opponent's characters, and they send that to the memory. Then your opponent brings that character back to the same slot he was in. The other effect is pay 1, discard a card. Choose 1 card in your opponent's waiting room, and your opponent shuffles all other cards in their waiting room back into their deck. So this card is, you always want to have at least 1, just in case. You're not always going to use that second effect mostly. Like, that's what it's here for, to decompress your opponent in those situations where they are out a lot of cards already and not too many climaxes. It can be really useful for getting a lot of extra damage in. And the first effect is nice. Not all decks, you won't really find too much use out of it, but there are certain situations where you can like remove markers or remove power that is lingering about. So it's just it's pretty useful card, and you definitely want to have 1 just in case. That's essentially what these level 2s are here for, just in case you need them. Next up, it's 2/1 Aina. She is a 2k in front assist to level 3s, and you can rest her as long as you have an event in your waiting room, which should be fairly easy to accomplish with this deck. You can choose one of your opponent's characters, and that character cannot, during battle that character is involved, your opponent cannot use events or assists. And it's only during your turn, but this card is important and like mandatory in certain matchups where your opponent has these super powerful events that can deny you damage or shuffle their decks again. It's super useful, and you always want to have one just in case. The power isn't super necessary, I think, but it's more for the event, and the power can come in handy as long as you know the numbers that can be hit in both the decks. But yeah, so one of those, and the last card for level 2 is this Bell. He's a backup, 2500 backup. The other effect is when you use him, you can look at the top card of your library and either leave it there or put it to your waiting room. These effects are always nice to have. You have a chance to take one less damage, or you're getting that much closer to canceling. The power is nice. Just in case I can explain later on when it might be useful, but it's mostly here just for that last effect. And yeah, so 3 level 2s, 1-ofs, just in case. It's fairly easy to search out a specific card in this deck, and you can kind of hold on to whichever one you might need. So that's really why there's only one copy of each of these. All right, guys, lastly for level 3, we got 4 of these level 3 Hestia. She's 8500 power base. Her first effect is she gets plus 1k power for each back row character that you have. Her second effect is on play, you can discard a card to take the top card of your clock, put it to your stock. And her last effect, she has a Climax combo with the pants. On attack, you can give one of your characters plus 1 soul, and the effect of if their damage is canceled, your opponent takes 2 damage. So this card is crazy good. It's like amazing ender. It's an amazing ender, and pants is always great to have as your last combo because it's very consistent. You can salvage more pants, but not only that, the combo is costless, which means it's really easy to have multiple of these. You're gonna just benefit greatly from herself because she also has stock heal. So this ender is not stock heavy. So even if you use like a few in a turn, you're kind of still able to repeat it the next following turn if they're somehow not dead. I've noticed that this is a huge plus because you can really catch up playing these because they still are healing you and you're getting some game end in, but it's still just like a powerful card to have. And there's a lot you can do with this combo, just the way it's set up. The fact that you give something plus 1 soul and the effect of the cancel means that you can really hit certain numbers that you need. Like, say for example, you just give it to herself. She's 4 soul with the 1k1, and if they happen to take 4 damage, that's a shitload. So that's already phenomenal. But if they cancel, which is more likely, 2 is a very good number to hit. So the fact that she can actually like take out a climax as well as probably do 2 damage is huge. And if you keep repeating this, it's great. But another cool thing and another example is you can actually, play multiple of these and stack them on one card. So let's say you're attacking with another level 3, you stack 2 effects on that level 3, and now they have 5 soul. So they can side a level 3 for 2 damage. They have 2 of the Hestia effects, so that if they cancel this 2 damage, they're going to take two more times. So it's like you can really set your numbers up to like precisely how you need them. And I think that's what makes this combo specifically out of the other Danmachi cards very strong. And yeah, so 4 of those. I mean, Hestia is the best, so got a runner. Next up, 4 of these 3/2 eyes, 9k power. Her first effect, If you have 2 or less climaxes in your waiting room, she gets -1 level in your hand. Her other effect, if she has herself in the level up zone, then she gets plus 1500 power, making her 10-5 base, and she cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects. And her last effect is on play, she gets plus 4500 power, and neither you or your opponent can use backups or event backups or events in battles involving this card until the end of your opponent's turn. So this card, I think, is super strong. It's like, I think this is the standout card in the set, and that's personally why I wanted to squeeze it into this deck. I don't see a whole lot of us trying to use this card, but this card is 15k on play. That's like a super huge number, and it is really helpful because you don't really run assists in Danmachi. Doesn't have like too many good assist options that provide power. So being able to hit 15k on its own is super great to have. The fact that she's indestructible, pretty much, like she can't be targeted, and your opponent can't use events or assists when she attacks, it pretty much guarantees that she's going to stick around at least until your opponent's turn, and then they have to figure out a way to deal with her. But even then, it's still a 15k like indestructible card. So it's like more often than not, it'll probably survive till your turn again, and then you get to hit again. You save on resources. It's like the best card to play at level 2, like the best early level 3 to play, honestly. And this card is so hard to deal with. It like kind of just sets you up for, it puts you in a really good spot to finish off the game once both you and your opponent are starting to hit level 3. And that's why I decided to fit this in after playing with so many decks. I do think any deck with this card this card is just so good. But yeah. Oh yeah, one more thing. Since she does have the since your opponent cannot use events or backups as well, it's very good to stack Hestia's effects onto her, because that pretty much guarantees that your opponent can't nullify one of these. Like, there's plenty of, like I said earlier, events that, make sure you deal no damage or shuffle your deck or whatever. There's no shenanigans. You're pretty much forcing your opponent to take whatever you're trying to deal to him, which is like, it's very useful. Like putting this and having that assist out, you're nullifying 2 of their chances to use backups like that can potentially save them the game. It is super strong. And that's another reason why I wanted to put this in, because it makes for that final turn to be super strong. So yeah. And lastly, for level 3, one of these bells, 10k power. When he's played, you can look at the top X number of cards of your deck, and X is equal to how many characters you have on the stage when he's played. So max, including himself, would be 5 if he's played last, and you can add one of those cards to your hand. Then the second effect is when he attacks, you can pay 1, discard a card and as long as you have Hestia's knife in your waiting room, he will burn 1, so deal 1 damage to your opponent. This card is pretty nice. It's I can't say I've used it too often, but I like having one-ofs just in case. It's like one of the only way you can get your climaxes is drawing into them, and this also is a bit of insurance, because there's no other way to grab your climaxes. If that last turn for some reason you don't have the pants combo, he will like save your ass, because you need that to do any kind of game ending. And the ping one is nice. It's it works with Hestia, so might as well, or the Hestia's knife, so might as well, that's a plus for slotting him in. And the 1 damage could set you up for a good turn. So it's just a nice card to have, but honestly, most of the time I don't really find myself needing to resort to him. But it's nice insurance to have. I always like having cards like that. And that's the level 3 lineup, just 9 cards. One thing to note is I only have 1 healer, and it's a stock heal, so it's a little intensive on your hand, and so you don't want to be like spamming stock heals. So this deck does not really have If you're getting unlucky and getting hit, smacked up, then you might get screwed because you don't have ways to really pull it back. This combo is really strong and you can put out a lot of damage in one turn, but that is one thing to note. I try to pay attention to mitigating as much damage as possible early. That's why I think the level 1 events are super important because they help you get to refresh faster, which means you'll cancel more, which means you will take less damage in the earlier turns, as well as that runner, the eyes, can run in front of characters, mitigating direct attacks early on. There's just a lot of ways to make sure that you're not taking too much damage and you're also playing 1k1s. You have a level 0 that has an extra soul. It's just keeping up in damage is something that is super beneficial for this deck because once you can get this eyes out, you pretty much have just a huge wall and they have to either start ramming early in level 2 and they kind of start losing hand to you, or it's like you're in a good spot and you can finish them off once you hit level 3 because you don't really need to heal that much. And even so, if you need to heal like a couple hits of damage, then playing her, ditching, and getting the stock back, and then playing pants, it's like you have the pants trigger. You have a lot of ways to grab other characters in your deck and in your waiting room. So playing this, putting the combo off, and then like healing to 0 is still viable, and then you will most likely be able to pull it off again the following turn, and that will be super deadly for your opponent. So I think it does end up working out well. I haven't found that the lack of heals is too debilitating for this deck. But yeah, so there's that. That's my level 3s. And as you guys guessed, 4 gate and 4 pants to maximize the level 1 Bell and the level 3 Hestia combos. So that's it for the lineup, and now I will kind of explain to you how I play the deck level by level, what I'm looking for, what I'm trying to get out of most of the cards. All right, so starting with level 0, the main card you're really trying to draw into to open with is this Eyes. 3,500 power is super good, and being able to run in front of your opponent's character is also super awesome. The chances that they'll be able to kill this card aren't very high. Like I said, 3/5 is really strong, and being able to reduce your opponent's amount of direct attacks by forcing them to side this card is pretty crucial to this deck and minimizing damage throughout the game. So super important card. Your other 2 options for really taking care of the enemy level 0s are the Suicider and the Anti-Runner. Kind of self-explanatory how useful those are. And it's always good to play this early just because you're shuffling through your deck and starting to hold on to events that you're going to play at level 1. So this card is super nice. This card is also useful. Like if you need to pay a climax out, this is the best one to pretty much use. Putting suiciding, you can take care of level 0s early. So these 3 cards are essentially what you're using to make sure you're trying to get some advantage at level 0. And another thing to note about your level 0s playing this Bell, it does, if you don't happen to draw into this Eyes, I will tend to resort to this Bell just because your other characters are pretty weak. And so playing these 2 cards can kind of like stall them out, I guess, in a way. This will prevent if they have a runner to get running in front of you, and these 2 cards can get some direct attacks in, and then you can bounce them back to your hand. It's +2, pay 1 clock +2. So it can be pretty useful if you're kind of running out of level 0 options, and it's not going to be too costly to open up your field for direct attacks. But keep in mind that keeping damage as low as possible in this deck is really important. So I only do this if it's not going to be too painful to take those direct attacks. Moving on, I guess the only thing left to talk about 0s is really you need at least one of these Hestias in the back row. Only one, but I do run 3, so it should be easy enough to get one. Especially by level 1, because that's when you're going to start playing your events, and you're going to want to be able to draw 1 ditch whenever you can. And having access to your Brainstormer in the back row is always something nice. Other than that, Your other zeros are really there just for utility and trying to grab things to your hand. So, all right, and for level 1, things start to get quite a bit more complicated. This is going to be your go-to utility card because starting from here on out, you want to be grabbing as many of these events and holding on to them as many as you can. They're both just super useful for filtering out your hand, grabbing cards that you need at that moment. But from here until I would say level 2, you're always trying to get your bell combo off. So this bell is pretty much your only way to kill things at level 1, but it is a very strong card for doing that. So like I explained earlier, this is usually the event I'll hold on to in the early hands because this is what's going to start milling your deck to give you more options to grab characters with this event if you happen to draw into this later, as well as this also needs to be in the waiting room anyways for your bells to be stronger. So I'm not really too afraid of getting rid of these cards early. There's plenty of other ways to either search bells out or grab them from the waiting room. So just kind of keeping that in mind, starting from turn 1, you want to set your waiting room up and your hand for, the first couple turns of level 1 where you can start doing the combo. And you always want to play as many bells as you can with the combo because they all pay for themselves. The Hestia's Knife you can get from wherever. It's super consistent to get from the deck and the waiting room. And these cards pay for themselves. The Hestia's Knife will always be a 1-for-1. You can hold on to it. You can use it on your turn if you think you're going to take too much damage. Or you can use it, it's perfectly fine just waiting until it's your turn again to really set up your first refresh. And after you get this combo off once, it's kind of like you're ready to refresh and you're in a good position. After the first refresh is when I would say that you need to be a little more careful when you start playing this event specifically, because if you mill through your deck, and this card as well, you still have a lot of milling, and that's the primary way to grab things that you may need, but you just want to be a little careful. You don't always want to go all 4 cards. It's always may, so you can go 1 by 1, see if you get a good option, and then add that to your hand. So that way you're not kind of taking any potential cancels in your deck away from you. And it's still easy enough because after the first refresh, the bells are probably going to die, but because you refreshed on your turn, and you're controlling that, they're going to be in the waiting room the following turn. So it's easy enough to grab them back if you happen to still have fire bolts or you draw into them again when you refresh. So there's a lot of consistency to repeat this combo. And then that's essentially what you're looking out for level 1s. And for level 2, it's just the level 3 eyes. It's however many you can play. I would say go for it as long as you're not, killing your compression too much. You're refreshing really early, and you can control fairly easily, I think, how many climaxes are in your waiting room. So timing this to come out at level 2 as soon as you're level 2 is why I think this card is so good in this deck, because I don't really have to keep clocking very often because these two are going to pay for themselves in hand and in stock because these things are super strong. Your opponent is going to have a really hard time getting over these. You're going to wipe their field because Bell can even hit super strong without really much effort. So this is when you start to really build your advantage considerably. You're making this huge wall that is very hard for your opponent to get over, and you are still controlling your refresh. You're still going through your deck. You're milling however much you need to make sure your refresh is good. You can pay out climaxes with these eyes or your other cards. It's not really that important, and stock isn't too heavy at level 3 anyways to play the Hestias because they do stock heal and the combo is costless. So you really don't need to build up a shitload of stock to kind of do your whole end game finish. So I think these cards, these level 3s fit in really nicely here. And your level 2 game revolves around this because at level 2, since this Hestia's Knife event doesn't require blue, you only need red and yellow. So I think this works really well. So starting level 2, you kind of want to think about what you want to hold on to and what you want to search out for the end game. Some of these cards are going to be more important than others in certain matchups, like ensuring there's less attacks with events and backups, decompressing your opponent because you notice that the waiting room is full of characters and not too many climaxes, and I mean, guaranteeing you get your combo. He's nice to have if you still don't have a pants and you're not triggering any pants to get the combo ready. And then lastly, just event is and not event. Backup is nice to have. The power is good. If you, I'd say if you hit level 3 before your opponent, this is a nicer card to have because you want to play your Hestias to heal a bit, probably, and you can do the combo and you can probably get the combo back for the following turn, and it's not cost heavy, so you're really not, there's not too much downside to doing it already, and having this in your hand after that is kind of like you can power up your Hestias to survive one more turn, and then that following turn you potentially can do the combo again because he also mills one. So it's just a nice card, just in case. So all these cards are one ofs because they're not always useful, and this is generally the time in the game where you want to start thinking about that. Okay, and for level 3, you are going to want to hold on to as many Hestias as you can because this is going to be your finish. You're going to be trying to kill your opponent with this combo, and honestly, it's really simple, your goal at this point, but there's a lot you can kind of do with this field. Like just this example, you have, if you happen to have another eyes in your hand and you play her, your opponent can't use events or assists. So you can stack Hestia's effect on her, and they have to deal with all of it. They can't just, a lot of decks have like no damage backups or, free refresh backups maybe. It's just stuff that they can normally use to try to survive a bit longer is suddenly like they can't use it. They're in a really bad spot because now they have to like they have to actually deal with this end game, which is pretty strong. And combined with this, it's like 2 attacks that they aren't going to be able to back up. It really can put some decks in a bad position. And you just have a lot of freedom in how you really approach this. Like I said, during the level 3s, you can put it on herself. She's doing 4, canceling, trying to get that cancel, get 2 damage or 4 damage is insane. Or you can stack it on one character and then they can side for more precise damage. And then if they happen to cancel that, they take 2 and 2. It's super good. Even if like your opponent left something open, it's like they still have to deal with a card like the 2 damage afterwards canceling. So you can stack it on the open slot and they take like if you play 3 Hestias, there's just a lot that can happen with this combo. And that also makes this deck super fun. Honestly, it's like you're crunching the numbers for that precise damage. It's really fun. And that's kind of it. That's all I got for this. It's generally what I'm thinking about when I'm playing these cards and playing the game level by level. All right, guys, and as far as alternative goes, I'm going to keep this list a bit short because it is going to be specific to running 4 gate and 4 pants. The biggest difference I think I've seen with a lot of set lists and mine is that I don't opt to run this level 3. And you don't have to run the eyes either. It does make, I think it's super strong, but you can just get away with running this level 3 because this one also comes out early. It's 9k base. If you have that level 0 Brainstorm Hestia in your clock, then she gets -1 level in hand. Her other effect is she gets plus 500 power for all your other characters, so she becomes 11k base. And her last effect is you can take the bottom card of your clock and put it to the bottom of your deck. It's a very good card. The condition, in my experience, is a little difficult sometimes. Controlling whether you get that Hestia in the clock or not is kind of annoying. That card isn't super useful besides having one out on the field and then holding on to it to clock this. And the bot deck heal is cool. It's nice. If you want more heals in your deck, this is a really strong option to run. But I opt not for it. I don't think it's completely necessary. But it's still a really good card, and you should feel free to run this and try it out. Next up is the TD level 3 Hestia. When you play her, you can choose a card in your hand that is the same level that you are or lower and play it on the stage, and it gets plus 2k power for the turn. Her other effect is you can discard a card on play, and both you and your opponent shuffle your waiting room into your library. And I've seen a lot of lists run this. It seems useful. I mean, imagine combining this with the eyes. You play her and she's 17k the first turn. You can only do this at level 3. And the level 3 combo Hestia is pretty weak. So this added 2k bonus, it's essentially free, like you're saving 2 stock. So I can see a lot of merit to running this. The second effect is okay. It's like I guess it's cool if you are having a bad final turn and you're not going to be able to finish them off. You can just play this, heal a bit, shuffle climaxes back into your waiting room just in case you're kind of screwed. And I could see some use in that, but I haven't really found it to be that impressive of a card. And honestly, I would rather fill up the lower level cards a bit more to make the deck more consistent from the start. So, but yeah, that option is there for you. And then for level 0s, this is more of like a preference. There are a lot of other decent level 0s available in the set that you can run. This one is the most notable to me, and that's why I'll go over it in here. When you play this card, you can pay 1, clock the top card of your deck, and salvage a character. And then her other effect is when she attacks, you can look at the top 2 cards of your own library, put 1 into the waiting room, and put 1 back on top of the deck. 1500 power. So this card is pretty good. It's a +1. It lets you salvage, and that effect can actually be really good late game because it lets you control your trigger with this attack. So this card is really strong, and I do like this card. However, my level 0 lineup now is kind of tight, and I don't really find space to put this in. You can opt to kind of just change the ratios around if you want to fit this card in. This is a very strong card still. So I just wanted to mention this one. The other level 0s are either they're good and not necessary. They don't really like stand out. That was really the only level 0 I would want to mention. And then another thing, this was in my first rendition of this build, this 1/0 Wealth, if he's on the stage, he makes these events costless, and you can pay 1, rest him to look at the top X cards, where X is the number of these events in your waiting room, and add one of those cards to your hand. So it's essentially +1, which is pretty good. And then on top of that, this event, it's 1/1. When you use it, you can salvage a character and give one of your characters +4k. And if he's on the stage, it's costless. So this is costless. You're salvaging and pumping something 4k. This is a very good. These are really good cards to have in this deck. You're already running a bunch of events. You're already going to be running the 0/0 Hestia that mills. And you can grab this event. This event also helps set up for your other combo. 4k power can really come in clutch, especially if you're not getting all those fire bolts in. And even so, you get all 4, you get this. That's 15.5 level 1 costless. That is really insane. And this wealth is pretty useful in the back row anyways. So these are really good cards to run. And I do like them. It's just once you add these in, you really start to run out of room for the rest of the deck. And honestly, I would think you want to take the 3/2 eyes out for this, which is not something I'm willing to do personally. I think that eyes is just so insane. But this is a very good set of cards. If you only want to run a red blue deck, throwing in those other level 3 Hestias as well as these 1/1 cards, or these level 1 cards, is a really good alternative. And that's kind of all I have left for this section of the video, alternatives. I mean, once you start changing things, it's just mostly preference, depending on what level zeros. But I feel like I already have all the good level zeros that you would want in this deck. There's not like a crazy amount of options for this set. And then once you start changing like what combos you run, it's just a completely different deck. So that's for another video. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope I didn't ramble too much and the information is useful for you guys. This deck is a ton of fun. These are all my favorite elements of the set, honestly. This combos, the level 3 eyes are just super cool, super strong too. And I'm looking forward to showing you guys more builds. This is just the first build that I wanted to show. It's essentially my favorite, but there's plenty of other decks that the set has to offer that are still pretty good, and I just do want to cover them on the channel. So you guys can look forward to that. And I do plan on making a 10th anniversary Aseo deck. A little old, but I still wanted to pay homage to the series that kind of started it for me, in Weiß at least. But I've been having trouble getting my hands on a deck that I wanted. There's been some delays. So I just decided to pick Danmachi up, and I'm not regretting any of it. It's still really awesome. But yeah, you guys can look forward to that as well. And that's going to be it. Till next time, guys. Peace out.